Los Angeles is dealing with an unwelcome title. It's been named the city with the biggest rat problem in America.
The city laughed at first. Los Angeles, promising a pet-safe rat-killing device? Too good. Too weird. Too simple. Clips bounced around with jokes about government infomercials and confused terriers. But while the jokes climbed, the rats did not slow. The scratching stayed. The droppings stayed. The problem stayed.
Generally eat a lot of rats. They will kill some rats, usually in the beginning when they first arrive at a new location, but typically they're actually just deterring them with their pheromones. That's enough to actually keep the rats away.
What rolled out next was not hype. It was a pattern. Small devices appearing behind fridges, beside bins, along garage seams, taking up the quiet work of changing how rooms behaved. No drama, just design. Stay with us, because the surprise is not that it worked safely around pets. It is why it worked so fast. The shift. That Los Angeles finally chose for years, the city threw the same tired tools at the problem. And those tools carved deeper trouble into daily life. Poison pellets waited beneath sinks like shortcuts, but leaked into the food web, dimming hawks and owls and endangering pets who had done nothing but follow their noses. A bright block found by a curious dog turned into a frantic midnight clinic visit. Snap traps caught fingers as often as they caught pests. Glue boards transformed cleanliness into cruelty, offering suffering instead of solutions. And ultrasonic gadgets, the ones sold as modern miracles, sat humming, until rodents learned to treat the noise as part of the wallpaper. So what the city needed was not more volume. It needed precision. Not louder warnings, but a smarter presence. A presence that made certain choices expensive for rodents while staying harmless to every pet, every child, and every non-target creature in the room. Nature hinted at a path. Real predation is not a violent spectacle, it is punctuation. A still shoulder, a shift of weight, a quiet boundary that says, "Not here." The question became simple. Could a home speak that language without turning the kitchen into a battlefield? From that question, the next idea took shape, moving from theory to practice without the theatrics. Engineers, behavior designers, sanitation crews, and home inspectors worked together on what they called a smart, safe zone, a compact device shaped around one truth. Rats and mice do not need to be chased. They need to be guided into a single, inescapable decision. The name mattered little. The principles mattered completely. Shape an entrance that only the target animal can enter. Make the interior decisive and fast. Make the exterior uninteresting to everything else. Teach people to place it on the paths rodents already trust, not where humans find it convenient. Species-specific geometry did half the safety work. A cat paw cannot angle through the narrow throat. A dog nose cannot make the turn. A toddler finger cannot navigate the curve. The attractant stays sealed inside, out of reach from any creature who does not belong there. And inside the chamber, the mechanism ends each visit quickly and cleanly, with no toxins scattered into kitchens, alleys, or wildlife. The sensors do not spy. They read only the signatures that matter for placement. Small vibrations threading along a wall, faint temperature seams near a vent, motion lines repeating the same midnight routes. The device does not know faces or names. It knows patterns, and patterns are enough. Think of it not as a clever machine, but as a quiet guide one that nudges humans toward the right placement and denies rodents the confidence they once carried. And as the understanding spread, one truth settled in. The power was never in the microchips. It was in the path. And that understanding shaped everything the governor said next. The announcement. That shifted the work, moving from theory to action. The governor's message was not a reveal of magic. It was an invitation, quiet, steady, and strangely practical. She asked households to stop fighting rodents with poisons and panic, and instead learn the simple grammar of boundaries inside their own rooms. Rebates would soften the cost. Workshops would show residents where to seal, where to place, where habits, not chemicals, do the real work. The goal was not to buy a box and hope. The goal was to build a practice that could move door by door until entire neighborhoods behaved differently. As the online jokes cooled, the rollout moved in silence. Early kits went to the most stubborn corridors, homes that had filed so many service calls, their histories read like diaries of frustration. Technicians arrived with units under their arms, checked for gaps, added brush strips, and asked residents to observe instead of rearranging. First nights were awkward. Settings needed tuning, placement needed correction. But that is how any honest method begins. Clumsy steps, then clarity. From those first nights came the long path to trust, and the earliest prototypes taught lessons the engineers could not learn in the lab. The first design stood too tall, broadcasting itself like a new appliance. Rodents treated it the way they treat a stack of bins and obstacle to skirt. Another prototype turned too gently, its motion reading playful instead of decisive. Entrances looked like open mouths instead of familiar tunnels. Proportion and tempo, it turned out, meant everything. Teams responded by trimming mass, lowering the profile, and tightening the internal timing. A steadier inner gate created a sense of certainty. A casing close to the wall felt like an established corridor rather than a hopeful gadget. Still, none of the improvements solved the biggest problem, the way people placed the units. Residents dropped them in convenient corners, beside brooms, on wobbly mats, in empty spaces that meant nothing to rodents. Results faltered until someone followed faint smears along a baseboard and found the real runway, the dark ribbon where whiskers brushed paint night after night. So the instructions changed. Follow the droppings, follow the chew marks, follow the soft rub lines on the wall. Place the device on the path, not in the open. A device on the path creates pressure. A device anywhere else becomes furniture. And once placement aligned with behavior, the evidence finally had room to appear. The next shift grew from that evidence steadier, clearer, and ready for the city to notice. From small wins to wider, confidence change arrived as subtraction. The midnight dash across a kitchen tile became rare. The bold daylight sprint along a garage wall receded. Wiring chew reports slowed to a careful trickle in homes that had seen a parade of repairs. Veterinarians saw fewer dogs sickened by secondhand toxins. Parents stopped bleaching the playroom every other day. These were not miracles. They were maintenance, counted without fanfare. The city refused to trust a mood without numbers. Pilot neighborhoods logged outcomes. Service calls dipped week after week. Poison purchases declined. Health inspection notes softened in chronic trouble spots. Grocery managers quietly ordered fewer disposable traps because fewer incidents demanded them. Even footsteps changed. People moved with less startle, the kind that used to lift shoulders at the crinkle of a bag near a bin. Evidence calmed doubts, and calm made room for the next surprise. What the device did to people. The most unexpected story did not scurry on 4 feet, it walked on 2. Households began closing the dog food bin at night because the application offered a soft reminder at dusk. The application did not scold. It simply drew a calm circle on a map where activity rose when the bin stayed open. Smokers stopped flicking crumbs toward the curb because it looked careless next to a device quietly doing its job. Renters pressed landlords to fix gaps after a weekly report showed how many visits slipped under a door that should have been sealed years ago. Businesses changed as well. A back door that had always sat propped for convenience started closing without debate because the presence of a device made laziness look like sabotage. Restaurants tightened trash routines, not out of fear of tickets, but because a clear screen turned a habit into a choice no one could shrug away. In schools, custodians placed slim units beside problem corridors and then documented the calm that followed. The practice moved from annoyance to shared pride. With new habits came new questions, and questions sharpened the work. Criticism, scrutiny, and the edits that built trust. Pushback arrived, as it should. Some insisted this was surveillance dressed in a harmless silhouette. Others feared that constant killing might attract more animals rather than fewer. A few worried that the device could confuse pets or frighten a child on a midnight snack run. Another contingent asked whether households were outsourcing care to a gadget instead of changing the habits that create the problem. Project leaders answered by opening every window available. They published what the devices could and could not sense. No faces, no audio, no personal identifiers, only motion fields and thermal traces tied to location, and only at a scale that informs placement. Wildlife advocates reviewed release schedules so neighborhood birds and beneficial creatures would not be disrupted. Code taught the unit to yield if a real cat or a curious dog investigated, backing down rather than posturing. Detractors asked for proof and received logs and revised designs instead of slogans. Trust did not arrive as a pitch. It arrived as edits. Even so, no good method reaches calm without surviving failure. Before we go deeper, think about this. What is the one place in your home where the tiny sounds bother you most? The pantry corner, the garage shelf, the space behind the bin? Tell us in the comments. You are not the only one dealing with it. And if you want more stories about quiet fixes that make real problems shrink, hit subscribe. Tap like, too so. This kind of calm solution reaches more people. Failures, fixes. And the return of ordinary failure is public when devices touch everyday life. A heat wave slumped units into thermal fatigue and lined alleys with useless boxes. Cooling sleeves became standard in hotter districts. A teenager stole a unit for a joyride, gifting the city a messy 2-day headache. Anti-theft alarms arrived, loud but harmless. Each stumble wrote a note in the margin. Prepare for weather. Prepare for mischief. Prepare for the obvious. A software update misfired and made several devices hold identical aggressive stances in a morning market. That morning produced a guardrail in the posture library, so one glitch could not spread a bad mood down a block. Lessons like these are unglamorous. That is why they work. A neighborhood festival forgot its cleanup and turned a well-managed corridor into a buffet overnight. Permits changed to include same-night inspections. Residents forgot to empty chambers, and a redesign made neglect difficult and odors rare. Anchors improved so children could not tip a box, and pets could not nose one across a floor. The method matured not by avoiding mistakes, but by refusing to repeat them. With repairs in place, ordinary life returned without ceremony. The less dramatic the fix, the faster calm settled back in. Calm belongs at home, and homes taught the lesson, back to the city. A day in a house that learned the method, evening in an ordinary bungalow. In the kitchen, the smart safe zone rests flush against a baseboard where the paint shows a faint lane. Its exterior looks like a simple block with rounded corners. A curious toddler taps it once and forgets it. The family dog sniffs the casing, meets an uninteresting angle, and walks away. The attractant is sealed inside, out of sight and out of reach. At night, a small body follows the seam between dishwasher and pantry, pauses, and slips into the tunnel throat. The visit ends quickly, and the chamber locks. In the morning, the application suggests a wipe down and a reset. No theatrics, no celebration, just a simple ritual that belongs with coffee and keys, a small task that buys a day of calm. That calm radiates outward. How a single home became a whole neighborhood's calm. Moving from private fixes to shared rhythms, the change did not spread through press releases or campaigns. It spread the old-fashioned way. One neighbor showing another what actually works. A block captain hosted an evening chat and pointed out the faint rub marks threading along a wall, the tiny runway that mice and rats had used for years. She showed how the device belonged on that exact shadowed line, not in the bright, convenient corner humans always choose. Soon, people were lending hand drills, trading extra brush strips, comparing maps of paths they had never noticed before. Landlords, who once shrugged at complaints, found themselves looking at clean, calm data logs that made neglect unmistakable. Even the grocery manager coordinated with residents behind the store so the units indoors and the habits outdoors supported each other instead of undoing one another's work. Gradually, the method shifted from new device to new rhythm. Trash went out on time because lateness suddenly looked careless. Lids closed by instinct instead of reminders. A light near a walkway stayed on through the night, not for drama, but for clarity. No one congratulated themselves for any of it, and that was the point. These were not heroic acts. They were the return of ordinary care. A presence had reminded people that prevention costs less than cleanup, and entire blocks began living that truth. From that shared momentum, the lessons distilled into a usable, portable blueprint. Target the path, not the room. If you cannot find the path, look closer. Make safety the default by refusing exposed bait and open mechanisms. Pair every device with one habit shift. Seal a bin, fix a gap, clean the corner you pretend is fine. Share only the data that helps neighbors understand their own spaces, and let code not promises prove the limits of the system. Accept that maintenance is the price of peace, and that seasons will break your perfect charts. These rules do not sparkle in conversation. They shine in kitchens and garages, where they quietly work. And once people saw how a small, honest signal could reshape behavior without harm, their imagination widened. Maybe a perching figure could guide pigeons from vulnerable landmarks. Maybe gentle mechanical pollinators could support gardens until habitats recover. Maybe soft lights could guide coyotes towards safer crossings without fencing the land. The point was not to mimic the wild. The point was to send one truthful cue at a time and leave room for life to do the rest. Moving from neighborhood success to broader possibility, the surprise was not how far the idea could reach. It was how naturally it began right at home. What no one expected and why it lasted. The most surprising part was not that a well-designed device could kill rats and mice while protecting pets. Engineering can manage that part when engineers listen to the right teachers. The surprise was how quickly households became better caretakers of their own rooms. The device offered influence without rage. It turned 1,000 small temptations into a handful of better habits. It rewarded attention without applause. It enforced courtesy without a fine. The governor's clip faded from timelines. What remained was quieter and stronger. Blocks organized small funds so lower-income households could receive units and ceiling supplies. Teenagers learned to read rub marks the way birders read trees. Parents slept easier. Electricians noticed that a heat wave passed without a single gnaw-related outage. Veterinarians saw fewer poisoned pets. The streets did not become pristine. They became predictable in the right ways again. That predictability made a final truth obvious. The closing of one loop and the opening of another. The story that began with jokes about a governor selling gadgets ends on a different note. The devices stayed. The habits shifted. The outages dropped. Breakfast resumed without a ritual of worry around the cereal box and the pet bowl. The technology was not the story. Design was. A quiet presence made boldness expensive again, without poison and without panic. The city remembered that safety is not a speech. It is a practice made of small, steady acts that leave room for ordinary peace. From there, we return to the ground. Dusk, a porch light, and the work that continues. The evening is warm. On a small porch behind a narrow house, a unit sits where the stucco meets the wooden threshold, its body still and its purpose steady. It angles its inner gate toward the seam and then away, choosing watchfulness over fidgeting. Down the steps, a worker closes the latch on a bin that used to dangle. Across the yard, a cat who is very alive and very amused by everything pads along a fence and glances at the device without alarm. In a service room across town, a technician notes a slowdown along a corridor that had flared the night before and smiles because the repair held. None of it asks for applause. All of it adds up to a home that breathes a little easier, which invites one last question. Tell us, what small habit would you change first? What space would you claim back, not with noise or panic, but with presence and care? Drop your answer in the comments. We read everyone. And if this kind of story speaks to you, real problems, solved with real design, hit subscribe, because the next quiet solution might start where you live. Also, if this made you think differently about what change can look like, tap like. It tells the algorithm that not everything has to shout to matter.